This is the Dallas Morning News.
You're biased, but I will tell you, Gerald Turner and the run he had at SMU, that's about as good as any college president in the last 100 years.
Well, being an alum, it's just remarkable to see SMU come back from somewhat of the ashes of the death penalty in the 80s, and then Turner took over in the 90s, and then he's had a remarkable run for 30 years that has transformed the school, both from a real estate perspective to an R1 research institution, and obviously the ACC with athletics.
It was interesting listening to the stories, but I'll tell you what I probably got more out of it was a view of leadership and how you accomplish things when you don't have all absolute power and its influence.
Well, Tom, when you and I have talked about him, we've talked that he's the university president, and he really doesn't have a ton of hiring and firing decisions. He's got to be an organizer of people. He's got to empower and embolden his people to go lead well, and that's what he explained in that episode.
But more and more, that's what it's going to be in the corporate world, too. It's going to be a question of influence and persuasion as opposed to absolute control.
Absolutely.
Great lessons from him.
Yeah, wonderful episode. Tune in. Welcome to Intersections, where we take a multi-generational look at the critical issues facing America. Tom, we've got a fun one today.
We do. Our Gerald Turner, up until a couple of days ago, the president of SMU, and that was the case for 30 years.
30 years.
And if you look over that 30 years, the achievements were significant. I might argue that no college president in the last century has had the run that you had at SMU.
Yeah.
Endowment, when you came in, less than $500 million, leaving at $2.1 billion. The last capital campaign, $1.6 billion. Met target 3 years early.
Yeah.
Sports.
That was supposed to go to $2 billion. By the time we would announce, since we were going to make it this time, if we did 3 more years, we would say, well, now the goal is going to be $2 billion.
You saw applications go up 56% in your last year. You brought a presidential library, which is a significant achievement. Athletics we'll talk about a little bit. Sum it up, say SMU is a hot school, and 30 years of your tenure made an enormous difference in that.
30 years ought to make a difference if you've got people that are willing to work on the same goal. And really, people ask me, what are you most proud of? And I have to say, I'm most proud of 30 years of being on the same page with the Board of Trustees, which can't happen in state schools now. And long tenure is very important for a private institution because you got to make friends, you got to make contacts, you got to do all the things. And so 30 years with the board and I being on the same page, with the board and me being on the same page was, I think, what I'm proudest of, because all the other things come from that.
Any disappointments?
Well, that I've run out of time.
There's always more to do.
Yeah, that's right. There's always more to do. And there are not any failures that are inability to do certain things that underscore it. There's certain projects that we didn't get done just because of the lack of funding or whatever else, but we found other ways to make progress.
I can't think of many. 60 buildings in the 30 years?
Well, that includes 4 or 5 parking garages, too.
they're
which are more important than the buildings.
How many fountains? How many fountains did we get?
Not enough. If you look at the Simmons quad there, Jerry Ford's building, and then Harold and Annette, right in the middle is all that greenery, and it just kills me when I go through there thinking that either needs to be a fountain or it needs to be a Caroline, because we now use the top of one of the old science buildings for that. And
exactly.
So, anyway.
You grew up in a small town in Texas, New Boston. Not one that we associate with SMU, high academia. In fact, much like me, you actually did time at a junior college before you went on and get your bachelor's degree, then master's at UT and your PhD at UT. As you look back on that time growing up in a small Texas town, what created the foundation that has given you the success in leadership? I know a number of times you've spoken to about a very close cadre of individuals that you grew up with, that you've stayed in contact with, met regularly 7 decades later. What about that growing up has made a difference in your life?
Well, my dad was the junior high principal, and my mother was a 5th grade teacher. And so education was a big part of it. And at that period of time, right after World War II. New Boston had attracted a whole lot of people to it. It was 2,000 before, and it ended up being 5,000. And the quality of the teachers there was amazing. It really was. And so you look at the people I went to school with, they're lawyers, doctors, all the kinds of things. And that percentage of them is not there anymore or other places. It was just a period of time of about 30 years or 40 years there that the same group of teachers, outstanding teachers, and the professional achievements of their graduates was pretty remarkable. And I went to junior college simply because I wanted to play basketball. I was signed with Abilene Christian. I wanted to play at SMU. I just wasn't good enough or tall enough. And
I think you reversed that decades later.
yeah. And so Abilene Christian had a little All-American guard named John Ray Godfrey, and the coach told me, you can either watch John Ray or I can get you at a junior college where you'll play every game and you'll develop for those 2 years. And so I didn't even know there was a Lubbock Christian. I hate to say that at the time. And my dad and I drove up there, and the coach said, I said, you need to see me shoot. And he said, no, D-Nut says you're good, so I'll take you. So that's how I got there. And then I tore up my knee my sophomore year, and I went on to Abilene, which on an academic scholarship, which was a great blessing because that's where I met Gail.
Were the teachers that you mentioned back in New Boston, were they the reason that motivated you to go into academia?
Part of it was just my family. I had aunts and uncles that were first-generation college students that taught. My mother's family, all of them got some advanced degree. My dad's family, he was the only one. And so it was at that turning point. And so they so valued education that we played 5 sports, but you did your schoolwork, you went to church, and then you played your sports. Mm-hmm. It was sort of in that order. And so there was just a lot of, I did an interview with Richie Butler at his church, mm-hmm. and he was asking me a number of things like that. And I said, well, one of the things you just learned is that there was a great struggle in that town about how it is that you fit in everything with going to church on 3 days a week, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night. And that my dad had this phrase that when we say, well, we want to do this, that, and that, he said, no, why not? He said, we don't do that. So you ended up with the idea that there's a pretty strong drive to succeed, but there's also a strong drive to do what you thought was right.
Yeah, contribute.
Yeah.
Yep.
So talk to me, actually going to go a little off script here because you brought up kind of the church element. Talk to me about your faith. How has that influenced the last few decades of your life and your family life, obviously with Gail and the kids?
Yeah. Well, I think faith's always been a big part of our lives. I've always, since I got my degree, preached at different churches, anybody that invited me, and I've been to a lot of and I've been to some that were not Christian, and their religious ceremonies and so on. So I just believe that there is a call, purpose for all of us, and basically either being is eternal or matter is eternal. And once you decide being is eternal, then you kind of go through a process of, well, what's the best representation of it? And, as I said in my commencement speech, I concluded it was Jesus Christ. You may conclude it was Moses or Buddha or Muhammad or whatever else. But the main thing is to deal with it. Don't just put it aside. Think through it, constantly be challenged by it. And so I've taught Sunday school here for 30 years. Mike Boone and I share a class, and so whenever I can't be there, he does it. And whenever he can't be there, we have Judge Cooter Hale takes care of it. And so it's just a part of our lives. Gail's the same way. And so as a result, the whole idea of how you're called differently affected my degree in psychology is social psychology, personality. Well, social psychology is what groups do. Personality psychology, individual difference psychology is why did some of them not do it? And so that fit with very much into what my view of life was. And it also comes up with, like when you have COVID, you basically do everything you can, do all the steps that people tell you to do, But then you don't just hide. Students particularly, they don't do well when they're isolated for a while. And I think we're seeing the implications of that. And so we opened up in the fall of 2020. And everybody on the East Coast and West Coast, we already had our class made, but we could have had a lot more students from people just calling at the last minute saying, so-and-so's not going to be open. Can you take one more or two more and so on? And the answer was, I think we took 8 or something like that. We had at the last minute people, but you had a choice. And I believe also in that too. And 80% of the students came back and 20% of them took it online.
Yeah.
You made an interesting comment, and that is you've got to face up to decisions. Faith is clearly one of them. It seems in today's world, a lot of people don't want to face the decisions, kind of walk away from those. Yeah. And not just talking about faith, but in business, public sector, those sorts of things too. Why is that? What's happened where people don't kind of want to face reality? I always say one of the first elements of leadership is defining reality. Yeah. And we don't want to do that. We either want reality to be what we want it to be or what we think it should be.
I think a lot of it has to do with just fear of criticism and fear of failure. Mm-hmm. And either one of them, kind of puts you in the doldrums where you can't move one way or the other. And so in talking with students, I really tell them, you need to get inside yourself enough to know why, if you can't make a decision, what it is. It may be that your fear of failure and your fear of criticism or various things like that. You may be impulsive, and so you make bad decisions, and you've learned that, and so you just don't make decisions. But the point I try to make is, if you make a decision, you may be wrong and get criticism, but if you don't make a decision and it just sits there and lingers, you're going to get criticism for not making a decision. So pick your poison, and so you can be right, wrong, or not make a decision, and that's going to be wrong.
Well, you went from Abilene Christian, UT, then professor at Pepperdine, then to OU, and then you went to Ole Miss.
Right.
And as one of the youngest leaders of a college university in the nation at age 38, you just raised the importance of dealing with decisions. You had one at the time at Ole Miss where you had an extremely popular football coach.
Yeah. He's an alum.
An alum, very popular. And again, at an environment at Ole Miss where football is probably close to religion. But you had to make a tough decision. You saw recruiting violations, and you had to make a decision to release that individual.
I did, and not long after I got there, we had the same problem. And I'd worked with a number of people at that time, and we decided to give them another chance. And there's so much rule breaking going on in that part of the world, the whole SEC and so on. And so to hold somebody responsible when a lot of other places didn't was not particularly popular with a lot of people. And so as a result, the fact that he was an alum and the previous coaches generally had not been, so he was very popular, and he had done a pretty good job. It wasn't the fact that we were 3-8 every year, and so. But again, it's you just can't allow certain things to occur, and you not say that we don't do that. And he had some people take some recruits, high school kids, to some strip clubs in Memphis, and they had alcohol and all that kind of stuff, and they're 17, 18 years old. And there were a few other things like that. And so I said, that's not who we are or who we should be. And so we did terminate him. And frankly, it's been one increased level of success ever since then because the person we brought in, Tommy Tuberville, who now is a senator, at that time was an assistant, and so as a result, he came in and he had worked with a lot of very successful coaches, and so as a result, he knew how to build one. Whereas Billy had come from our head coach had come from small Louisiana schools, and so this guy had come from A&M and other places where he'd been assistant, so he knew how to do it, and things have not been the same ever since in terms of just the success of their program. And interesting enough, some of the people that criticized me the most at that time have either seen me and said that they were wrong or written me notes or various things like that. And so the leadership of the state was always with me, the leadership of the board. And so it was just the people that are on the fringe that really, my view is, don't care so much for the universities, they care for football. And you always have fans. That's what I call fans. And you always have fans, and you just have to work with them. And at that time, there just wasn't any precedent for it. And so Gail and I both have great fondness over our 11 years at Ole Miss. You got there, and there was just so much that needed to be done. Yeah. Never been a campaign. The endowment was $8 million. I think now it's more like 800. And they didn't believe you could raise money and all of the sort of things to make it just come out. And I was the first chancellor from a long time that was from, as they say in my introduction, I'm the first chancellor from west of the Mississippi.
Well, clearly
it's a great place.
Yeah, clearly a lot of success. And again, large institution, nationally known. Clearly sports were a big part of it and well thought of in that. And then all of a sudden, somebody says, Dr. Turner, how about thinking about SMU? At that time, sports programs were probably at the bottom, not from an SMU standpoint, but from a national standpoint. Some challenges at the school, too. What was the attractiveness about SMU? Why did you move from an Ole Miss to an SMU? Did you see something?
Well, I saw my heart in that I always wanted to go to SMU. And I had 4 sets of aunts and uncles here in Dallas. And I didn't feel like I'd done what I went to Ole Miss that I needed to do. And so I just turned down opportunities. And finally, as my younger daughter was getting older and ready to get into her senior year, I gave a couple of headhunters a list of a few schools, and at the top was always SMU. And if it came available, I wanted to know about it. If somebody else, other places came available, I didn't care. As hard as I work, I got to care about the institution and the state and so on. And so the SMU one came available because, unfortunately, Ken Pye passed away from cancer. And so I knew him. In fact, I'd visited with him in what was later my office before. But so when Ole Miss came available, SMU came available, I really wanted to pursue it. And so it worked out very well. Ruth Altshuler was on the search committee. And when Ruth decided for me, I knew I had.
It was a done deal.
It was done. So 30 years at SMU. Talk to me about, some of the achievements, and obviously you transformed the university. In a lot of ways, SMU has transformed Dallas for so many reasons. Talk to me about the biggest challenges. What did you face coming in? Tom mentioned the football program and where SMU was at the time post-death penalty and kind of trying to restart athletically. But talk to me about the academic challenges. And, you're out of the Southwest Conference. You're now the little brother compared to your old foes, Texas and Oklahoma, et cetera. What did you come in? What were you trying to think about those first 10 years and face those challenges head on with?
When I talked with the board after I'd been here, I guess 3 or 4 months, and assess things, I told them, all right, you want to increase the quality of the students. The best place to do that quickly is to have a lot of pre-med students and engineering students. The bad news is our worst facilities academically are in the sciences and in engineering. So we've got to do a whole lot about that. And if you'll notice, the Dedman Life Sciences building was the first building that we built. I said we got to have at least 3 engineering buildings. It took 12 years, but we eventually got those 3 engineering buildings. And now we'll probably be adding a 4th one pretty soon. And then the other problem was, from an athletic standpoint, I was appalled at the quality of the athletic facilities. And the reason was, every time football, take OMB Stadium, every time there should have been a new stadium built, there were other places in Dallas to go. So Doak Walker, Cotton Bowl is the house Doak built by reputation. Right. The Pony Express went out to Irving. Because when I was at Oklahoma, I'd come down and watch the OU Texas game, and a lot of times SMU would be playing somebody out there at night. The OU Texas game was in the day, and so my brother and I'd go out there and watch SMU play. And being a little town option quarterback, I just marveled at Lance McElhaney and the Express, the way they ran it. And I knew I could have run it that way if I'd had a chance, but lack of speed and skill probably kept me from it. But nevertheless, I remember telling Ray and Nancy Hunt right after we got here, I said, this doesn't work. I mean, I saw that we packed up kids in buses and took them down to the Cotton Bowl, and except when the fair was open, it's a graveyard, and it didn't generate any kind of enthusiasm. So I took them to Ole Miss and showed them the Grove. And I said, what the Grove does, if you have a place that gets an identity and that people really enjoy being in, what it does is that it provides reasons to come, two things. It provides reasons to come whether you're winning or not. And you can be losing and people still come. We tested that theory.
You got it.
And it worked. But the second thing is that it allows you to recruit students. And I don't mean athletes, but there's something on campus that they come to. And on Friday, they check around all the academic things and so on. And on Saturday, they go to the boulevard. And so they said, well, what would we do? And I'd already thought about Bishop Boulevard, that beautiful, and with all of those trees that were planted right after World War II. And so I said, we can use it. And somebody said, yeah, we'll call it the Mustang Grove or something. I said, no, we'll call it the Boulevard. I said, it has the continuity of name kind of image that Grove does. And so call it the Boulevard. And now it's just taken off.
Well, 30 years later, I can't get a spot on the Boulevard. So I might have to call you after this and see if we can work something out.
Raise your offer.
Yeah, that's what I have to do.
Well, you touched on it, and it's an amazing statistic because if you look at schools that have done well in football, so the year after Florida wins their national championship, applications go up 25%. TCU makes it to the end, their applications go up a similar amount. Last year, we saw 56%. SMU all of a sudden comes in, is in the playoffs, has won the ACC in their first year. What is the connection there in terms of applications, attractiveness of students to success on the football field?
European universities don't have athletics. Right. It's an American phenomenon. And we're just by nature so competitive that sports is a bigger part of it. And TV and streaming has made us almost unhealthily fixated on sports. But nevertheless, it's a big part of what we do. That was called the Flutie effect, if you remember when Doug Flutie threw that pass at Boston College and they won. And what you found initially was that you'd get more applications, but they weren't the best students. I mean, they're not in the top 10%. I mean, they're basically just kids that like the experience, and the academics just has to be a necessary evil. And so, but what you found now is that more and more students who are very good students still like sports because their parents do, the society as a whole. We had two things. We quit charging an admission fee at the same year we won the ACC. And so those two compounded together to give us that 56% increase. But once we started improving our athletic facilities, and if you just think about it, the stadium was just the first thing. You can go down the line. Our tennis facility, we only had 5 courts. Now we've got a great tennis center.
Aquatic?
Yeah, the aquatics. The pool was half of a lap, and had been a gym. And now we're there. The golf, we didn't really have anything. And now we've got Trinity Forest that we worked out with the city and contributed, I think, $6 million to that so that we have our facility out there. And track, Ray Washburn, and soccer. Mm-hmm. Last year, we were number 10 in the country in soccer. Men's soccer, women's soccer is coming up, and the stadium would, in that nice facility like that, all of a sudden we had some full houses, for just soccer. And so all of those we had to do. And the biggest challenge was, and the biggest opportunity, when I got to Ole Miss, they were so still reeling under the integration Meredith crisis, and they were tired of it. And you talked about the enrollment. The enrollment had dropped about 3,000 students to where when I went to Ole Miss, it's smaller than what SMU is now. Now it's 18 to 20,000, but it had just dropped. And so I saw a group of people that were so tired of getting beat up, they wanted to move out and get a national reputation and get over all the race stuff. And so for all the opposition I got on race issues there, it wasn't from the leadership of Ole Miss. It was from what I call the colonels out there that just didn't want integration anywhere. And so you come here, and everybody is really down and out over the death penalty, and how would we get back from that one way or the other? And Ken Pye, because he had so much work to do internally, kind of pulled back in many ways from the city, and he didn't particularly enjoy that kind of work anyway. And so the third point the board gave me when I was hired was, and re-enter Dallas. Get Dallas back. We're Dallas's university, and we'd pull back for 5 years. And so we changed a number of things in that regard, and started doing so many things with the city. Gail and I, have been on nearly every board we could be on, and involved with it, with you and everybody else.
I can testify that.
Yeah, and so making Dallas, bringing them back in as Dallas's university, and the harder part is making it Dallas's athletic team, because Dallas is so full of majors from other places. I told you one time, look, all we wanted to be is your favorite number 2. If you're from Michigan, well, then we'll be your favorite number 2. If we play Michigan, you can root for Michigan. Otherwise, adopt us. And that has been slower in coming about, simply because the football program was, when we got moved down after the Southwest Conference broke up, that was devastating to all of us, but particularly to us, because we still had all that death penalty stuff, and people pulled back. So what we had to do is get people back enthused about the university. And the whole thing on fundraising is, if you have a vision and you can articulate the vision, and you can get people to get excited about and see its value, and then show them how they can help with that vision, then people will do a lot of things.
Let's drill down to that. And I want to get to R1, the Bush Library, those sorts of things. But in terms of football and the sports, so first year in a power conference, 2/3 wins. So you win 2/3 of all of the contests. Football across all other sports.
Well, we won all of our ACC games.
Yeah. Well, but in terms of all the sports.
All sports.
You won 2/3 of the games, if you add all
of them together, right.
Football becomes a key one with great success for first year. But with that, and in terms of the football and those pieces, when you entered the ACC, you entered in a very different set of circumstances than California or Stanford did, and clearly the schools that were there. You really forego to get in monies for a 9-year period. And again, everybody talks about the importance of TV money, et cetera. You said, we'll forego that. But then in the space of a relatively short period of time, your alumni came up and basically replaced all that money.
For 5 years. Yeah. Isn't that amazing? We wanted very much to be in one of the, at that time, 5 conferences. And it looked like we'd end up being in the Pac-12, and it kind of fell apart along the way just about it. But we had a consultant that lives in North Carolina, and he said the ACC is going through some odd situations, and you saw that eventually was sort of the lawsuit of Clemson and Florida State to try to get out. And it says there are a group that really want to get more money based upon performance. That right now it's all split exactly the same. And that's just offensive. He said, the socialists versus the capitalists. He said, so we need they want some money. They want some money to be able to divide up based on performance. And so,
which has really been the Florida State Clemson push.
Yeah, that's their push. And so we started talking about it with them. And the first they said 7 years, and then they came back with 9 because it fit more with the TV contract period of time that the ACC had. And we thought, man, that's just too much. And Rich Templeton, vice chair of our board, said, I don't want to be sitting here next year, not in the conference, because we said no to 2 years when we've said yes to 7. And being a good business guy, everybody looked around. That makes a lot of sense. And so that's why we agreed to it. But we also knew that there's no way we could compete if we didn't have the kind of support that we have from private sources. And so Ray Hunt actually came up with the idea of, let's have something really special, $100 million in a week. And David Miller and the people who can make it happen Bill Armstrong, David Miller, Rich Templeton. You can go down the list. I said, let's do it.
30 calls got you $100 million.
Got us $100 million.
So tell me the story of the Friday that I think we were working on a press announcement or something with the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And I think it was in the works. It was going to be announced. The Pac-12 dissolves, and you're sitting there. Who's the first phone call? What was the first thing you did? You hear the Pac-12's dissolved, and then 4 or 5 weeks later, you're in the ACC. Talk me through those 5-6 weeks.
That Friday night that we were supposed to get the offer from the Pac-12, and the 4 schools that eventually left were the ones that wanted us in there the most. And so when they got all upset about things and left, well, then, we didn't want to be in there either. And so, but we had all of this had started rolling out with the ACC. And we were telling the ACC, and we said from the very beginning, whether we can get in the Big 12, the ACC, or the Pac-12, we want the ACC because it's more like us. Most of the conferences have 1 or 2 private schools, and one of those conferences said, when we said, well, what about academics? And they said, well, it won't really matter. What's your football record? And so,
and we don't want to mention that was one of the local conferences.
No, we wouldn't want to say that. And ACC, of course, they were very much, in fact, if we hadn't made the academic improvements, we wouldn't have been on the table. I mean, literally, the private schools had so much to do with us. Notre Dame, Duke, Wake Forest, all of them, you can go down the list. And so that got us on the table. And then the fact that we athletically had done well the last few years in the American, which is a conference I helped create when the Big East fell apart, when we thought we were in the big time before. And so as a result, that when you've got a great football coach who brings in good people and things are going well, everybody recognized that Rhett, and they still do, and that's our challenge, is to keep him, that Rhett is one of the outstanding young football coaches in the country. The fact that he was there helped us too, and the fact that we had won the AAC. And so it was an interesting time because that was going on. And so, frankly, it was almost with some relief we could pivot full time. You got to have, a bird in the hand's worth 2 in the bush. And if we were about to get the bird in the hand with a Pac-12, then we felt like, well, we'll have to do it because we didn't know for sure the ACC would work out. But when we could say, absolutely,
that was always
we'll
your
do
preferred
it.
move.
Yeah, and we would do it. And that gave Jim Phillips, the commissioner then, the ability to start talking with the other schools about doing this.
Okay, I want to pivot a little bit because of all your achievements, the sports was an important part, but it's just one piece. You became a Tier 1 research institution.
Right.
We talked about the academics. That clearly is an important piece. Plus then, against competition of a lot larger institutions with arguably a lot more resources, you pulled out the Bush Library. There's not a whole lot of presidential libraries. How did you pull that off?
We had a lot of help, obviously. And our biggest challenge was that we didn't have as much land as our competitors did. And so DFW was a big help with the fact that people from all over the world could fly in directly and not have to drive somewhere. And some of the places, they would either have to get on another flight, a shuttle or whatever, or drive some distance. When Texas went into it, they obviously have the Lyndon Johnson Library, and it's so well established. We just hoped and tried to use that point that they'd be starting from behind one of them. The dad one at A&M, son and father at A&M, in terms of the kind of money that we wanted to raise and for it and that they wanted to raise, there was just a question of how 41's library got started there and what the financial issues were and so on and so forth, and the fact that it's outside a major city. And the fact that the Bushes had lived here was a big positive. The fact that Laura was a graduate, she's also a graduate of UT Austin, was a big positive. But we didn't have as much land. We had the minimum, which was 12 acres. we got in trouble with the mayor of Dallas who wanted to see what our proposal was, and we weren't going to show it until we had to the president. We said, when the president wants to see it, we'll show it. And but we aren't beforehand. And then you remember she basically said they were going to support the University of Dallas's proposal. And so Ron Kirk and I had made the agreement, and you and I had talked about it, but Ron Kirk and I had made the agreement that we would be Dallas's proposal. Because a lot of people wanted it at Fair Park and other places. And he said they're not going to want to do that. If you can put it at SMU, then that'll benefit Dallas because all the hotels are in Dallas that feed into that. So it wasn't easy. But again, we had Ray Hunt had, his organization ability is just incredible, as you know. And on big issues, he sees them better than practically anybody. And so he and Gene Phillips and a lot of other people, Ruth Altshuler while she was healthy and so on, really helped with it. And we got it organized. And the idea was to raise $300 million by a certain date, and we did, and then move it to $500 million. And so, and in there, I wanted to guarantee that we would have academic programs between the library and the university. And so in that first $300 million, a chunk of it each time went into an endowment for that program. And so as a result, every year, Ken Hirsch and I, our provost and his director, would get together and say, okay, here's how it's what it's earned, what programs are we going to do. And so we have two just incredible programs that are funded by that fund, one in economics.
People think of it as being a library, but it's really the institute with all the academic side.
Yeah, and the programming now for the future, it's the programming, and heaven knows we need a middle-of-the-road voice.
Yeah, and not unlike Hoover in terms of that library and really being a thoughtful, knowledge-building institution.
Yeah, and we're going to be more like that, but also have a lot of public programming that would be a part of it. That's more of the model than some of the others around.
You've been in academia for 50 years. You've seen a lot of different changes in it. There is a lot of pressure on higher education right now.
Yeah.
Is a college degree still worth it today?
If you look at the difference between a high school graduate and a college graduate, it's entirely worth it. And the quality of life, I think, that it opens up for you, it makes it worth it. I do think that the idea that everybody should go to college is not right. Mm-hmm. It's not correct. But they do need education, training, whatever you want to say, beyond what you get in high school. High schools are coming more into that line and also working with the community. Dallas College is terrific at getting students ready for the real life, afterwards by working with the high schools and everything else. So it's definitely worth it. And if you look at the few people that are exceptions, Gates, some of the others, are just exceptions by name. And I mean, they're so smart that they can do it and creative. And they're just not good examples. And to me, it drives me crazy when these billionaires say, you don't need a college education. Yeah.
Who's to say?
Yeah. Five of you have made it all right.
And as you pointed out, I think people are understanding that college degree, you earn more, lower unemployment, et cetera. But what they don't understand is what you touched on. Lower divorce rate, longer lifespan, lower medical costs, and on and on and on. And on. But with that, there's a lot of pressure coming on higher education today from a political as well as a societal standpoint. Have colleges moved too far to the left? By moving to the left, have they kind of shut out two-thirds of the people and the opinions of two-thirds of the people? We talk about freedom of speech. Is there freedom of speech in higher education today? Or is it going so far to the left that it actually precludes other differing viewpoints?
To that last point, it's gone too far in some places, but I think to paint all of higher ed that way is just entirely wrong. There are most colleges and universities have a diversity of opinion. The ones that get singled out and that in many instances, there are some correct accusations there. If you just take critical theory, you can go back to critical race theory, critical colonial theory, critical whatever you want, and it has, you can get books at it, but what the basic outcome of it is that anyone who is in power or anyone who has in any way abused a group of people in any way, that they are evil, and that that you should basically be on the side of those that are the minority at all instances. So, for example, how did some of the Ivies get so out of whack on the Palestinian thing?
Right.
Well, by that theory, which so many academics follow. And by the way, it's been around a long time, and you use it in law to basically try to teach lawyers, you have to ask, why does this law exist? And sometimes it's a political reason. Jim Crow, that was voted in. So you have to kind of go through that to make the lawyers understand the history of law. But when it gets moved into other areas, then if you've got a smaller country that for some reason or another is being viewed as opposed to being opposed by a stronger country, well, then you favor the smaller one and decry. And the whole time, these are people who are using the most powerful tools in the world. They're at the most powerful universities in the world. They are all of these things that there's a blindness to it, but that's the history of it. It used to be that you would have Jewish students in the Ivies and everybody, they were just bright students that went into different areas, finance, whatever, entertainment, whatever. But when you get this going, then all of a sudden, you'll read that there's an effort to try to say, well, we really are opposing the Israelis, not Jews, and that's a small difference there, and so that's what's led to all of this, is that you have so much pressure brought to bear by certain people you admire, faculty or so like that, and it's mainly is that you're supposed to oppose anything as evil that is powerful. So business people, you're evil. I'm an administrator, a leader of a university. I'm probably got a problem with it too, and so that's kind of where it all started and has broadened out to so many areas.
We've moved, and if you look at the numbers, clearly higher education institutions have moved a long ways left. In a lot of cases, 90 to 95% of the professors will all either classify themselves as liberal or probably more accurately progressive. But with that, now we have a Trump administration that's come in and gone at Harvard, Columbia, to name a few. Has the Trump administration gone too far?
You want me to just jump in the middle of all of that, do you?
Hey, you're not president anymore.
Yeah, I know. Any response to a problem usually is generated by an over-response.
Yeah.
And so I think we're way up in there. We seem to forget that most of our engineers and basic science people weren't born here. And you go out to TI and look at their new products area and so on. I've walked through there, and it's a United Nations.
Their new CEO.
Yeah, it's a United Nations. And so for the idea that we're going to somehow denigrate everybody that wasn't born here or something like that, we have got to have graduate students coming in here from other countries, or we're not going to have engineering programs. It's just that simple. And with the huge developments that are coming up in technology and all of the things, AI is just one of them. The computing, the plasma, there's so many computing areas we have got to have the best brains, or China and Russia and so on will have those, and it'll develop there.
They can fill the holes.
So the idea of what do we need to do, I think calling attention to this, the pendulum going way too far to the left is something. One of the reasons I wanted the Bush Library, and Ray and I talked about this a lot, that it would always ensure, because he told me from the very beginning when I visited with him, I mean, I have my opinion, and my opinion is, the 4 clauses of that whole setup, but also conservative politics in general, but opening to everybody. And so that's the way we've had all kinds of opinions expressed. But then there is an opinion that tries to stay moderate, and that's what I've been all my life. And so I can work with the left, I can work with the right, but somehow we've got to get them together. And I've always viewed that as where I needed to be. And I wasn't going to be at a far left school or a far right school, but where I thought my calling was, in terms of being able to work with both sides. And so, so once he said that was the case, and he told me, he said, well, don't you have some faculty that don't want my library? And we had about 60 or so out of 800. And I said, Mr. President, if we didn't have some faculty against this, I'd have to go rent them and bring them in so you would think we're a real university. I said, but the question is, do all opinions get to be expressed? And the answer is yes. And we work really hard on that and try to educate our students when they come in. One of the reasons we have not had as much trouble as other places, we work hard during their first year to teach them cultural intelligence. Once things started heating up, I started doing the convocations for each first-year class every year, so I could start telling them what the values of this place were, and that here's what we expect, and so on. And then Maria Dixon Hall comes in and talks about cultural intelligence, which is basically just trying to understand the opinions and the backgrounds of everybody. Somebody said, well, it's just a cover for diversity. Well, it's really not. It's really an effort to try to teach, people what is the background. Not only regionally do you have some differences, but just religiously, politically, everything. And it's worked really well. She's been a genius.
I've got one to close it, but I know you want to.
Yeah. Well, quickly, I want to thank you for the Bush Library. I interned there my senior year at SMU. And so I got to be firsthand living example of what the symmetry was of that relationship between the educational side and then getting to intern inside the Bush Institute. So that was fantastic. Quickly, for just the future here, what is President Hartzell coming into? Obviously, you have a long legacy at SMU. What are the next 5 to 10 years look like for the school?
Well, I think he's going to be shaping that and expressing it. When David Miller told me who it looked like would be the best possibility, and he asked me what I thought about him and so on, I was delighted. My fear was that we'd have to bring in somebody that 30 years of work just kind of go down the tubes. But he has the ability and the drive and everything else to continue it. And so I think what you'll see is that he'll be making a number of changes, but most of them will be oriented toward just taking to the next step. Law, in the last 3 years, if we'd gone into this campaign, law would have been the priority. We've got to do something about law like we did for the Cox School of Business and so on. And so we need somebody to do what David Miller did with the David Miller Business Quadrangle, name the whole complex, so that we can make it as first class as the education there is. And so when it comes to maintaining and making sure that the technology expertise that we've initiated with the supercomputing center and all these sort of things, AI and everything else is going to change so much. And I think you're going to see that that's something that he's really going to be focused in on and so on.
I can tell you, Mr. President, I want to have chapter 2 of this because there's so many other areas to go into and the importance of higher education, not only in this community, in the nation, and in the world. You've brought a perspective on it and a success building an institution that I think we can all learn from. We think of president as being something that's all powerful. Well,
no,
a university president isn't all powerful. In fact, it is all based on persuasion and it's all based on influence. And I think the comments that you've made today, just the way that you've handled this in a very thoughtful way, says so much about why you accomplished so much during the 30 years.
Yeah.
We appreciate you being with us, but we want you back
to do it. Yeah. All right. I'll be able to come back anytime you want.
It's a deal.
Thank you.
Right.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate it very much.